Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 20 of the Mind Body Soul Transformation Podcast. This is the last episode for 2024, and again I am so grateful to have you here with me. In today's episode I'm going to discuss a topic that has repeatedly come up for me over the last few months, probably almost the whole time that I've been recording this podcast, and now feels like the right time to share it. And I'll be completely honest, walking into this podcast recording, I am feeling a little bit nervous about sharing the topic that I'm sharing today. And it is usually something that I would shy away from because it is on a topic that's not directly related to my experience in this lifetime. And therefore, I walk into this recording and into this conversation with a bit of hesitancy that is based around me wanting to respect and honour the voices of the Indigenous people and cultures around the world. To be very clear that my intention today is to share the message that has been repeating for me, that I do think it's really important for us to be receiving at this time. And it is much more about what the big picture is here, what we need to be doing our own learning, relearning, unlearning around, we being really the non-marginalized sections of society, and what that might mean for us in the future. The how this happens, I think that is really important, that the Indigenous voices of the world are given the space and platforms to share what this looks like, how we go about what we're being asked to do at this time. So with all that said, let's dive in. Now, I've been reflecting as I've been preparing for today's podcast about when this really first started coming in for me. And looking back, I can actually see that it was well before I started this podcast, and even before I was really heavily on this spiritual journey of mine. It really first surfaced for me before I did my first Reiki 1 course. And that was when the story of the white buffalo calf woman first came into my consciousness and my awareness. I think at that time a white buffalo calf had just been born somewhere in the United States. I don't have those details on me. And probably through YouTube, I saw some stories come up around this prophecy that relates to the white buffalo calf woman and what the birth of these calves were signifying for humanity. Now, since then, I've done a bit of research around this, particularly more recently. I'll go into that shortly. And there have been a number of white buffalo calves born over the last decade or so. But I wanted to start there because even as I was preparing for today's podcast and pulling some oracle cards, as I always do, one of the cards that came out of the 55 card deck, so I've got 4 cards here, one of the cards out of 55 was the white buffalo calf woman. And really what I wanted to talk about today was this message that has been coming up for me in so many different ways. The idea that Indigenous and ancient wisdom is rising. In fact, I shared with you a couple of months ago that I went on a bushwalk and had a bunch of downloads come in on that bushwalk, and a lot of them were around this, that Indigenous and ancient wisdom is rising. And I've sat with that, as I've said, for a long time, because whilst I want to tap into that for myself, whilst I absolutely see the importance of that in the path that we're on to this new earth, to this new reality, to changing out of this current timeline for humanity into one that's much more centered in all of the beautiful things to come. As I've mentioned, it felt like not my story to share, not my path to walk. And that was my ego getting in the way. That was me being scared of putting this message out there and having it received poorly, having other people judge me. One of my biggest shadows and biggest wounds is around this response of people to the words I say, to my actions, to how they interpret my intention. But as I said, this has come up for me so many times, including recently, and I'm seeing more and more of really evidence of this around the world. And I touched on this very briefly in last week's episode. And so this is where I want to go today. But circling back to the white buffalo calf woman, and she is from the Lakota people, and she was around about 19 generations ago, and she held or passed on her sacred pipe, which she's holding in this picture here. And the sacred pipe is told to be a symbol of peace and interconnectedness. And she foretold at this time that when the white buffalo calves were born, this was a signal of great change, a call for humanity to return to spiritual harmony and balance with nature, and a reminder to honour the sacredness of life and live in alignment with the core spiritual principles. Now, as I've already mentioned, there have been a number of white buffalo calves born over the last decade or so. The other parts that come along with this prophecy is that this time, when all of this was to take place, was meant to coincide with an environmental crisis, which absolutely we are in the middle of, a great spiritual awakening of humanity, which again, we are absolutely in the middle of. No way would I be sitting here recording this podcast if it was not for this shift and this awakening of people. And a time where we needed to do great healing and reconciliation and honour the Indigenous wisdom and sacred traditions that guide people to live within balance. And of course, to bring about unity and peace, which was the symbol of her pipe. And so when this card came out, as I was just shuffling to get some final messages around how to really guide today's conversation around this topic, honestly, it brought me to tears. This has been such a guiding light of mine through my whole spiritual journey and awakening that I've been really not that conscious of. And along those lines, recently it came into my awareness that I had a past life as a Native American. And I'm still trying to unpack exactly what happened within that past life. I do know bits, and I do know I've carried with me a lot of grief and trauma from that past life that I am needing to work through in this lifetime and heal. So there is a strong connection of mine as in this lifetime, Caucasian Australian woman to the Native American wisdom, but also all Indigenous wisdom, and this deep knowing within me that we need to return to that, and that there is a bunch that I want to unpack in today's podcast about why we are so separated from that right now, and the importance of returning to that wisdom and knowledge and ways of existing in this earth, but also acknowledgement to the fact that there are a lot of historic wounds there between the colonizers, me being one of them in this current lifetime, and the Indigenous people of the lands around the world. And that we have a lot of work to do, particularly on this side of it, to heal those wounds and to recognize how that still shows up today. It's still being perpetuated on the world stage today, but also how those wounds and the division and separation that has been caused, how the truth that has been withheld or changed impacts how we turn up in the world today. So a lot to go over. I do want to keep it to the core principles and just a greater message. I think it's really important that we all do our own research and learning and unlearning, as I said, in this space. There is so much out there and available to us, and we all have a role to play here. So let's dive in. When I say the rising of ancient and Indigenous wisdom, what I know that to mean deep within my soul is not learning or anything that makes this sound like something that we don't have within. This is a remembering of the wisdom, the collective wisdom that lives within all of us. And until we can come at this conversation from that place, the division that has been caused and still reigns will continue to make this challenging, if not impossible, path to walk down, despite the fact that this path is essential to our ascension, to our walking into this new timeline of the new earth, or the 5D. And so it is this idea of we are all one, we are all connected, and therefore we all have access to this wisdom that has tried to be suppressed and changed and withheld from certainly us, but also those within the Indigenous populations themselves. And I will go into that a little bit more a bit later as to the why there. When I'm talking about this knowledge or this wisdom, I'm really talking about the spiritual, the philosophical, and the metaphysical knowledge and principles that these cultures and populations lived by. And whilst today's conversation is mostly focused around Indigenous wisdom, I do want to acknowledge that this same conversation or this same remembering of wisdom is also happening for ancient populations. Think Atlantean, Lemurian, whatever else it might be, as well as our galactic family. And so there is a lot coming online for us right now that we can tap into, that we have access to, that will help us walk the path that we need to. But in terms of our role on this earth at this time, connecting with the Indigenous wisdom and doing that healing work that needs to be done for our lifetimes, our ancestors, our intergenerational trauma that we have both caused and possibly received. I want to focus this conversation around the Indigenous aspect of this. The Indigenous wisdom and ways of being emphasized the core principles of what this new earth has been described to us as being: harmony, interconnectedness, a deeper understanding of the universe, our earth, and a deeper understanding of our potential as humanity, which is hard to see and connect with right now. It focuses on the interconnectedness of all life and the need to remember that and honor that, and tap into that in a way that is respectful for that, and honors the need to find sustainable ways of moving forward that honor that interconnectedness. It's those energetic principles and healing practices that we've totally lost touch of as a 21st century society, and the need to live in alignment with the natural cycles of our earth, of our bodies, and the importance of this for maintaining our health, the ecosystem, and the health of our earth. Really, when we tap into this knowledge and wisdom that we need to, it is about honoring and supporting humanity's evolution, our evolution towards a more conscious and heart-centered existence. That is exactly what has been described to us as the new earth. But as I've touched on already, for us to really walk this path and tap into this inner knowledge, tap into the knowledge of the beautiful people that currently walk this earth with this knowledge in their conscious minds, we need to acknowledge the past and what has come before this time. We need to acknowledge the need for Indigenous sovereignty and self-determination. Because until we can do those things, we cannot really have the respect for the ancestral wisdom that we need, and we cannot have access to it. These wounds and these actions of the colonizers of the world have caused division. They've caused oppression. And as we know, they have colonized many lands that previously belonged to these Indigenous populations. And it is our responsibility as people of the earth, navigating this time, wishing to connect with this wisdom and knowledge, to call in a world that is united, sovereign, and aligned with this wisdom and principles for us to do the work that is needed to restore the balance and justice that these populations deserve, to honour the diversity across the globe, whilst also honouring the fact that this diversity has to be honoured within the scope of unity. We must address, acknowledge and repair the historical injustices that have taken place and continue to take place, as well as the current systemic barriers to these populations for making their contribution to the world, for honouring their traditions, their wisdom, their knowledge, their ancestors, and finding a way to support the revitalisation of these cultures through a framework of mutual respect and really love and oneness. This certainly includes us acknowledging the stolen lands and finding a path forward to return these lands to their rightful owners, particularly those lands that hold sacred and ancestral importance to these people, and providing them the stewardship that allows them to work with these lands the way their ancestors did and honour all that is anchored in this ancestral and Indigenous wisdom. Another big piece of this path forward is alignment with the truth. An acknowledgement that the truth has been withheld or adjusted throughout history, as it continues to be today, with similar acts taking place on our globe right now, to replace the truth with narratives that glorify colonialism, that glorify conquest, and that glorify assimilation. All things that we have forced along these populations and then covered up the truth with narratives that made it look like the right thing to do, or at the very least lessened the severity of how all of this took place and continues to take place. And through this changing of the narrative, changing of history, changing of the stories, we have caused cultural erasure. Meaning not only do you and I, members not of these populations, not know the truth of our past, of the past of our ancestors and the past of these people, and how we got to where we are today, but the same is true for these Indigenous populations, particularly those that don't have access to the storytellers that held on to the truth and shared this wisdom generation to generation. We forced these people, these communities, to assimilate with our ways of living, with our community, with our ways of being. We colonized their lands. We stole their lands. We stole their children. All through the lens that we knew better. That our way of being was better. That our way of being was right. This makes me so emotional, so sad, and also just so angry. And if I'm being honest, so upset with myself for how indoctrinated I have been throughout my life. For how, whilst I've always listened to these stories through a lens of empathy and compassion and a knowing that we hadn't done the right thing, that I never realised how much of the truth was being withheld, how much of the truth I didn't know. And I never, until this year, went searching for the truth. And it's these uncoverings of how much truth has been withheld, how much the narrative has been controlled, that has helped my awakening, but has also made me realise how much the systems that we currently live under and within, the powers that be that currently control this narrative, control these decisions, support these decisions, are not only not aligned with where we're heading as a collective, but absolutely need to crumble. That the truth across this and across all areas needs to come to the surface. And I know the distress that is going to cause when that happens. Because it is not a nice feeling to sit here and realize how blind and naive you've been for your whole life about this and about so many other things. And to think that the people, the systems, the structures that you once trusted to do the right thing to keep you safe, to keep everybody safe, have been doing far, far from that. And not only have they been doing far, far from that, but they did that all intentionally. That every action of these powers, of these systems, has been to cause division, has been to cause separation between us and the Indigenous people and cultures and their ways of being, between us and our souls, between us and each other, between us and the truth. Every action that is taken, every technology that is put into our palms, into our homes, into our environment, have all been put in place to cause this division, to keep us controlled. And this is especially true in this area of the us versus them, the idea of race separating us. When really we are all one, we are all human, we are all connected not only with each other but with the earth and all living beings on it and outside of the earth. And so, as well as doing the work around colonialism and your role and your ancestors' role in that, and to the relearning and unlearning that needs to take place for all of us, as you do that, give yourself grace, give yourself compassion, but also start to recognize this truth, the bigger truth that I'm speaking to. Because once we can start to look at the events that are happening around us through that lens of what is the purpose of this, how does this serve whoever it may be, whatever group it may be, to maintain control, to cause division, to cause fear, to keep us out of our hearts and our connection with our intuition, with each other. What is this trying to serve? So that you can get out of that and connect back in with what's important. Because that is the key piece of all of this for us to be able to move forward. And once we do that work and we're doing this reconnection with ourselves, with our inner wisdom, with each other, that is when we really will be able to connect with and integrate this ancient and Indigenous wisdom that needs to come through to allow us to move forward on this path. This is going to change our ways of living in this world completely to something that is much more in alignment, much more sustainable, much more beautiful. But first we must overhaul the legal and political systems that are rooted in colonialism, that suppress the Indigenous sovereignty, and that are causing the division that we're seeing. I know that's challenging for me to share, challenging to hear, challenging to recognize. And that when we talk about these topics, it's too easy to turn the other way, fall back into the day-to-day, to get distracted and to not actually go do this work. But this and your inner work, one and the same in some ways, are the most important things that we need to be doing right now. We need to do this healing to allow this wisdom and knowledge to come in and to allow us to take the actions that are needed to repair these historical wounds and to bring us all back into unity and recognize the sacred relationships that we held between each other, between the earth, and amongst different communities across this globe, and that those relationships need to be grounded in respect, reciprocity, and shared stewardship of these lands. What we are actually doing in allowing our Indigenous populations to reclaim their sovereignty is that we are all reclaiming our own sovereignty, our own self-determination outside of these systems that have not only forced a hierarchical power that did not serve the greater good of all, not only resulted in the murdering of too many people by government systems, not only caused division of an us versus them to push us into fear and separation, not only took away our power that we've actually had this whole time, but actually suppressed our collective wisdom. Our wisdom that we did have the power, our wisdom that we did have the knowledge and wisdom to be able to live on this earth in a way that we all want to. That is so far from the lives that we are currently living. And a way that is equitable for all, that is using all of the earth's resources in a sustainable way, and allowing every single person and being on this earth to have access to the resources that they need to live that life. We're moving towards creating our own systems that are based in freedom and equality and mutual respect, kindness and compassion and love and unity. And that makes me so excited, but there is a lot of work to do between now and then, and we have to do the work. And if we don't, we continue to live within the systems we currently live within. We continue to hand our power over to people that exert that power against whomever stands in their way. It is time for us to reconnect to our spiritual essence, to the earth herself, to our interconnectedness, to our unity consciousness, and take our guardianship and stewardship of this earth seriously. For when we honour her the way she deserves to be honoured, she will support us with everything that we need to create the lives, the freedom, and the beauty and love that we all dream of. I know it seems hard to believe that we have the power to create this change, but the truth is we do. That is exactly why they've tried so hard to keep us as controlled as they have. Why they're continuing to try this, and why we will continue to see tactics rolled out to push us into fear, to push us into division. Because they know that we are so close. We are so close to world peace. So close. We are so close to honouring our inner wisdom and knowledge that we all share. We are so close to unlocking spiritual insights that right now we can't even fathom. We are so close to harmony and a beautiful existence, the one that we all dream of. But to get there, we have to claim our sovereignty, we have to claim our power, and we also have to claim our responsibility of healing. Healing not just this current lifetime, but our past lifetimes, and healing our generational lines, healing our ancestral lines. That is why we're here at this time. That is what we came here to do. That is our responsibility and our role in this transition time of the current way of being to the new way of being, of the current earth and timeline into the new earth, into the 5D. At which time we'll step into new roles and new responsibilities. But right now, we have important work to do that is more important than anything else. And that means that we have to put time aside for this, that this has to take a priority, that everything else about our current 3D existence cannot keep us sidetracked from this path, from this responsibility, from this journey. And I'm not saying we all should quit our jobs and just spend all day, every day on this. Well, I don't know if we're going to turn it around that quickly, unfortunately. But I am saying that we need to be carving out time that is available to do this work, to dive deeper onto the topics that we don't understand, that we don't know, particularly the areas in which fear or division lives within us. Even if it's fear and division that we don't want to admit to, we don't want to acknowledge, we don't even recognize. Really diving deep within to look at the triggers, look at where fear and division comes up for you and start there. That was a hugely powerful and heavy way to end season 1 of the Mind, Body, Soul Transformation podcast. I am again really grateful for the time you've shared with me today in listening to this podcast. I would love to discuss this topic further if any of you are interested, share you some of the resources I've been tapping into. I am now going to take a break until 2025, and I'm very much looking forward to being back with you for season 2 of the Mind, Body, Soul Transformation podcast. I do have a feeling that there may be things that take place over the next month or so that might see me record a little bonus episode, but we will see. We will see what happens, and if I feel the urge, I will follow that urge and release something outside of the planned seasons. But until I am back recording an episode for you, thank you again all so much for your support this season, this year, as I've dove into something that is brand new for me. I have absolutely loved this journey that I've been on. This has been hugely healing to me, and I truly hope with all my heart that this has helped you in your own journey. Thank you, and goodbye, everyone. Loads of love from my heart to yours.